Hi, welcome to Season 4, Episode 8 of Everyday NLP Bites in Conversation with. For the last in this season, I am delighted to be accompanied by Sue Knight. And more about Sue and how we know each other in a moment. My name is Florence Madden. I'm an NLP trainer and coach based in Cumbria in the north of England. I'm the author of The Intention Impact Conundrum and the co-author of Everyday NLP. And if you've not been watching or listening to earlier podcasts, I've been asking the same questions to people who are trainers, people who have an interest in NLP, people who are coaches. And the questions are, what is of particular interest to you in NLP, and how have you been able to use that in your life and work? So as I say, I'm delighted today to be accompanied by Sue Knight. If you're not already aware of it, Sue is an NLP master trainer. She is the author of NLP at Work, best-selling book on NLP. And also my trainer when I learned to be an NLP trainer. So she's got a bit of a responsibility there to people that have worked with me since. Anyway, over to you, Sue. What's been important to you in NLP, and how have you used that in your life and work?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. It's tricky to choose because so much has been. And overall, the heart of NLP, which is the process of modeling, studying excellence, overall, that's absolutely the most significant thing. And that encompasses everything in NLP, but it's often lost as an understanding of what NLP is about. So the technical term for it is modeling, studying excellence, whatever that means, in ourselves and in other people, so that we can reproduce that with consistency. That's a key word. That's a tremendous resource to have. So overall, that covers everything for me. And then within that, I suppose one thing that I like, I enjoy, I find very influential is the whole area of language, the linguistics. So neuro-linguistic programming. And I particularly, enjoy the study of language and the impact of that. So feel free to ask me about anything I'm saying, if you wish.
So can you say a wee bit more before you carry on with language about modeling?
Yes. Well, it is what NLP is. What we learn with NLP is a way of studying our experience. So a way of studying how I'm being, how I'm doing what I'm doing, how others are being and doing. So if I want to develop myself in a particular way, or if I witness somebody doing something in an outstanding way that I think, wow, I'd like to be able to achieve that. Or if I have a problem in my life and I think, how am I going to deal with this? Then finding people or finding times in my own life when I dealt with something similar, or looking for exemplars outside of myself and having a way of studying how they do that.
Yeah.
That's what NLP is all about. And because the important thing about that is that people don't know what they do that makes a difference. I know it's a generalization, but they don't know. So can't rely on them telling us. People take for granted some of the talents, or many of the talents that they have. And are often surprised when they realize that these things that they take for granted that they do fluently are really valuable talents. And so because they don't know to tell us, and they don't know the minutiae of what they do, it's often internal processes, then that was what bred the need to know how to study them in order to find those things out.
Yeah.
So it's a process of studying experience. That's very important. That defines everything I do, because it's not a way of lecturing or demonstrating or theorizing. It's a way of studying.
Okay. So how do you help people to discover that thing that they do that they maybe don't recognize or don't or can't describe because they don't even realize they're doing it?
How do I help them recognize it? Well, by me or whoever, but by me recognizing it in the first place and wow, that's a talent that they have, that they just do. I mean, usually people, the things that they do very well, they do just fluently. That's how come they're so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, by acknowledging it, perhaps you don't always have to interact with the person to do that, but in the programs that I do, that would be characteristic. And then looking at the minutiae of their behavior that add up to that particular talent. So looking at, because the principle is that the way we do something is the way we do everything. Okay. And it's much easier, and typically the only way to study is to study very specific aspects in order to reveal the whole.
Okay. Would you be able to illustrate that with an example? Obviously not mentioning anybody's name, but perhaps a time when you've done that either in conversation or on a course, or, you know, just to understand a wee bit more about how you do what you do. So asking you a bit of self-modeling there.
I mean, there are many ways in which I do that. I'll give you an example. I mean, this was actually an exercise that I gave a group yesterday. I find that often in life, people experience conflict, and they experience a conflict within themselves. So they usually express that or hold that as being a dilemma between wanting to do this thing and wanting to do that, or having a doubt about something. You know, perhaps it's a very common pattern is for people to feel pulled towards something, drawn towards something, perhaps in their life or their work, for example, but have lack of confidence, doubts about it, fear of making a decision. So they have this internal conflict of wanting to do it, and which leads to delay, procrastination. Yeah. And when they have that, the word that they typically use is but. So when people use the word but, whether with themselves or with other people, they are creating a kind of a conflict. I mean, conflict has many levels to it. But it's like, it's that or that, but I can't do it because of this kind of thing. And so an exercise that I gave a group yesterday was to take the word but out of their vocabulary. There were a few words actually I got them to take out. I said, I want you to engage without using the word but, without using why, and without using try. Mm-hmm. I think I might have added do on another occasion as well. Uh-huh. There's a lot of people have in their whole, you know, sort of demeanor that they've got to do something. They've got to have an action plan. And, you know, and that's very different kind of, I never finish up with action plans for people. You know, change happens in the moment. And the words that I asked them to use were and now, and what was the other one I gave them? But the and was the key one. Yeah. So instead of a but or an or, to use and. And that changes, you know, because it's like saying where people think it's this or that, and it's this but that. If they look for how things can be together, how they can be this and that, that's the real, that gives birth to really creative new ways. Yeah. And if I really, you know, take that up into the world at large, I mean, we've got a lot of buts in the world, you know, a lot of conflict in the world. And if we looked at how it can be this person and that person, this culture and that culture, you know, this place and that. And that's very often the last option to be that people consider, if indeed they consider it at all. So looking at, and by giving people these very, very specific things to pay attention to, like somebody just wrote to me just now and said, look, I sent this email to somebody who I've been having some conflict with, you know, in my work. And without even thinking about it, I've used words like possibility and choice and could and. She said, and it's had such a different effect.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And she didn't even consciously think about it. She kind of got some of that awareness, as I would say, in the muscle.
Yeah.
And there's so many more patterns in language. I mean, that one I think is particularly significant. But there's so many other patterns in language that to just recognize them, first of all, to become aware of these patterns in language, and especially ones that are limiting. It just opens doors, it changes state, it just creates possibilities, and that people haven't, because most of the obstacles, if you like, the limitations that people experience are self-generated. It's not to do with circumstances, it's to do with how they're reacting to circumstances, and so their talk to themselves, their inner talk and their talk to other people just plays a huge part in that.
Yeah, I guess our language is evidence of what we're thinking and experiencing at a deeper level. And
the other way around, our language creates our experience.
Well, or it works both ways, doesn't it? Really, it gives evidence of what's there,
Absolutely.
and gives it substance. And just love to listen to you telling that story, and how by changing that language you start to change people's experience, or people start to change their own experience, I guess, and of how they see things.
Yes. And I really believe that most people, certainly the people I meet on training, are there because they want to grow, they want to learn, they want new choices and understanding in life. And yet it's interesting how often people use old phrases, and I same in the media. They use the same kind of phrases in headlines, in the news, kind of hackneyed. And in business, you hear people talk about project management, team leadership, and you just think, oh, boring. It's been used for so long. Who's going to, so when people do projects on my programs and they start thinking about the area and they start thinking about, like project management, you think, that's not going to blow anybody's frock up. And so new ways require new language. And finding new vocabulary, new ways of expressing things, that in itself communicates a message that this is different, this is new. And I mean, words are very important to me because of writing a lot, writing my book and finding ways to express what's important. So, that's been important to me for a long time, is the way I express that. I've learned that over time through NLP particularly. And so there's an expression, there's a quote which I've used in my writing, which says, words create the path on which I walk.
Yeah.
And so being aware of the words that I use and the effect that I'm having with those words is absolutely vital in that.
Yeah. I think what I find particularly heartening listening to you, and I hope that people watching or listening to this find as well, is that some very small, what appear to be some quite small changes, can make some quite seismic changes in people's life and experience. And I suppose that's one of the things that's always attracted me to NLP, that, you don't have to know loads and loads and loads about that subject for change to start happening.
I mean, it's not just in the language, but that's what I'm kind of concentrating on today. But it could be a slight shift in a movement, for example.
Yeah.
Change our state quite dramatically by how we hold ourselves. And these things are influenced by what we're thinking, so somebody is telling themselves, what can go wrong, what might be a problem, which sometimes is necessary, but if it's a habit, that's when it's a problem. Then they'll get a posture that goes with that.
Yeah.
And you can tell, almost how people have lived their lives by the way they physically have sculpted themselves over time. And so it could be a very tiny change which influences, which changes state. And so, words are a very audible way, and visible if it's in an email or something like that, of being able to detect, well, how is what I'm saying, how is it achieving, how is it, because it's not necessarily, there's no fixed formula. It's about being aware of the words and measuring what effect they have, whether they achieve the result that we would wish for on ourselves and other people.
Well, I suppose it's basic systems thinking. As you change something in a system, be that language, posture, whatever, that something's got to change. And I'm also drawn back to that phrase I've heard you use on so many occasions, talking about the difference that makes the difference. And
I'm just laughing at your use of the term systems thinking.
Oh, right.
Only because it's so that's an example, if I may,
okay,
of an abstract term, systems thinking, and it's not wrong. It's used a lot, and it replaces something that would otherwise be active. So it's taken what would be an active expression and made it into an abstract thing. It's like people say, instead of the way I'm talking to you, instead of, they'll say our communication. Yeah, I'm relating to you. We work and we are living together. Our relationship. Yeah, it makes things static. So I was amused about that. That's a pattern that people have learned often academically as well to use. And most of this kind of realm where people are investing in their learning and growing, you see, because I use a lot of ing words, which are active words. Yeah. And so they are investing in this in order to be changing. Yeah. And yet they might be using words and expressions, language that are stuck, that create a stuck state. Yeah. So words themselves create a stuck state. So these abstracts can do that. Well, they do that through the abstract.
That's the effect of it. But yeah, no, it's always of interest to me, and just again, I find heartening just listening to you and that emphasizing that point that that changing something apparently quite small can make such a difference. Absolutely. In someone's life and experience.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that, Sue. I've no doubt that you'll have created a lot of interest, people wanting to know a bit more. So if people want to get in contact with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Probably by email, I would think is the best way. Yeah. There is my website. So everything's in the name of Sue Knight. So SUEKNIGHT. So www.sueknight.com, sue@sueknight.com. Those get to me.
Okay. And of course, for anybody watching or listening to this that hasn't quite caught that, it'll be in the paragraph that goes with this podcast in any case.
That was easier.
So it just remains for me to thank Sue for sharing a bit of her insight on NLP today. That brings us to the end of season 4 of Everyday NLP Bites, this time in conversation with. So look out for season 5, which will be coming shortly. So thank you to you for watching or listening. Bye for now.